Welcome to the Retirement Compass radio show. I'm your host, Mike Bauer, consumer advocate. And today I'm joined by Jeff Gove, partner and financial advisor at Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Stonebridge has offices in Grand Island, Kearney, Omaha, and Lincoln. If you want to meet in person, you can do that at one of those locations if it's conveniently located for you. You set up a complimentary visit with Jeff or a member of the Stonebridge family. And Jeff, we know that financial advice all over TV. I mean, anytime you turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you're going to hear a bunch of talking heads. There's a million shows out there. There's probably 10 million books out there. But the game has changed. Today, let's dispel some of the money myths that, boomers and maybe some people nearing retirement have heard for years and years that might not work in this new retirement reality. And let's start off right out of the gates with one of the biggest. Why is living comfortably on Social Security alone a dangerous myth today, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that everybody that's going into retirement, if you've worked in the public sector for over 10 years, if you have more than 40 quarters, then you qualify for Social Security. When you look at Social Security, it's really important to have a plan on how you're going to draw, right? Because when you look at it from a cumulative standpoint about how much you're going to get over your lifetime, for a lot of us, that's our biggest asset. So we have to make good decisions. The problem with Social Security is it's not going to keep up with inflation. So, maybe you're good today. You run the numbers and you say, I need $4,000 a month to live on, and our Social Security is $4,000, so we're good. The problem with that isn't today. It's 5-10 years down the road, where if it's not going to keep up with inflation, your expenses go up to $5,000 and your Social Security is only $4,500. Well, where are we going to get that extra $500? So making sure you have a good plan for that. If you're married, there are a lot of different options for you. If you're divorced and we're married over 10 years, there's different options available to you. If you're a widow, there's different options available to you. So making sure that you maximize that Social Security. The other thing is, when you look at from a widow standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, if you're married, odds are one of you is going to live longer than the other. So when one of you passes away, one of your Social Security benefits is going away. So the lower goes away, you keep the higher benefit. So again, if I use that example of $4,000 a month in expenses, together you have $4,000 a month in benefits, your income's going to go down with the loss of a spouse. So we have to have a plan for that. So you're going to hear us talk about planning a lot on this show. If you've listened to us, that's what we talk about. Social Security is kind of the starting point. And the income plan is make sure you have a good plan. It's going to allow you to retire and stay retired.
So, Jeff, what's something, if somebody comes into one of your offices or schedules a meeting with you and their primary question for you is about Social Security, what's something that you guys do kind of in reaction to that being a primary question that somebody has in that first initial complimentary meeting?
Yeah, the interesting thing about Social Security is it's different for everyone, whether it's how long did you work, how much did you make, how much did you pay in, all of these different things. What is your other income? What is it going to be taxable for you? Is it not going to be taxable for you? And everything in between. We have a software that we utilize where we can run a Social Security analysis that's customized just for you. So we put in your information. How much is your Social Security at full retirement? How much is your spouse's at full retirement? And then we can run different combinations. What if one of you were to draw at 62 because you're retired and the other waits till 70? Or what if it's 66 or 67? We can look at all the different options. What if you live a long life? If you have longevity in your family, if you live till you're 95, when is the best time to draw from a cumulative standpoint? What if you don't have longevity? When is the best time to draw? We can run all these different scenarios for you. So then you're going into retirement, you're making this really, really important decision, educated rather than, I'm hoping this is right, or this is what the neighbor did. This is what, my brother did. So it's probably the same thing for me. You don't have to go into that, with that mindset. this is a free analysis. So I'd encourage everybody to call or just go to our website and fill out the contact form on our website.
Just hearing you say that, it seems almost counterintuitive to me. It seems almost like a juxtaposition in terms of everybody, thinks about life and, hey, I want to live longer, and we do what we can. We try to stay healthy. We eat right. Some of us, I'm raising my hand right now, don't do any of those things, but we do what we can to live as long as possible and spend as much time with family and grandkids eventually and all of that. But also at the same time, Jeff, you have to look at that as a two-sided coin and go, okay, living long is a great thing that everybody is doing all this hard work to, check all the boxes to be able to do that. But then that's something that you and the team at Stonebridge, you guys plan for, because maybe people are kind of, solely focused on, I'm doing whatever I can to be as healthy and live as long as possible. But at the same time, okay, I got to be able to afford to live as long as possible.
Right. Yeah. Well, another thing is, if you don't have longevity, we see the other side of that too, where it's, well, my dad only lived to 70, so I'm planning on living to 70. Well, what if you don't? Like, what if you live till you're 90? And you plan to 70, that could be a major problem. So when I run a plan, when our team runs a plan, typically we're running that out to age 95. Because if we run it to 95 and then you live till 70 and you die, you're not going to care, right? If you live, if you plan to 70 and you live to 95, that could be a major problem. So we want to plan for, that you're going to live a long life because you could.
A captain can navigate the open ocean. Calm days, stormy nights, they've seen it all. But when the ship reaches the harbor, everything changes. There's narrow passages, shifting tides, and hidden rocks. That's when the harbor master steps aboard, a specialist who knows how to bring you in safely. I'm Tim Kulhanek with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and we're harbor masters for your retirement, guiding families through life's most important passage. Call the number below to schedule your complimentary retirement strategy session.
All right, you are listening to the Retirement Compass radio show. I'm Mike Bauer, speaking with Jeff Gove of Stonebridge Wealth Systems about some of the myths that maybe you've heard over the years, clearing out some outdated retirement ideas. If you're worried that your plan is built on old rules, give Jeff and the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. You can also go online, schedule a complimentary visit at stonebridgeiwm.com. All right, so Jeff, we talked a little bit about Social Security and people thinking that maybe I could get it all done on that. But here's another piece of old school advice. If you pay off the house, you're all set. You may have heard that from your dad or your mom or something like that over the years. Why doesn't that guarantee retirement security anymore?
Well, when you look at property taxes, and I'm all for going into retirement with no debt. I think that's a great thing. If you don't have a house payment, that's a part-time job that you don't have to have, right? But it doesn't mean your housing expense goes to zero. You still have to keep our house up. When we get hail here in Nebraska, you've got a deductible that you're going to have to pay, and then you got to fight with the insurance company about, I'll pay for part of the roof, or I'll pay for 3 sides of the house to be sided, but the 4th side's on you. There's a lot of back and forth because that stuff's very expensive. The other thing that, in Nebraska, we all recognize is property taxes. It gets to the point where, we pay our house off and then feels like we're renting our house from the state of Nebraska or from the county. So, yeah, it can be very expensive. We're looking at, your insurance and property taxes upkeep. You're probably paying a rental payment every year. So that expense doesn't just go away.
So another myth that the boomers have heard for years, and people entering retirement have probably heard many times, is about bonds, right? You hear about the 60-40 and then the bonds, and so the myth of just move your money into bonds when you retire is something that I'm sure people listening right now are like, yeah, I've heard that before. Why is that advice not as reliable today, Jeff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, over the last few years, bonds and stocks have been more heavily correlated. When interest rates go up, bond values come down. So, if you had taken that advice and you had moved your whole portfolio into a bond portfolio, maybe it's a bond mutual funds or an ETF that tracks, a certain bond index. And this isn't advice, just giving you the information. A couple of years ago when the market went down, I think the market was down like 18% a few years ago. Bonds were down about 12% over that same time period. So that investment that, over the years you were told this is rock solid, it's going to be that buoy that buoys your portfolio. If the market goes down, it's going to provide that safety. It didn't do that. In a rising interest rate environment, your bonds can lose value. But there are other options available to you that are safe. So rather than looking at reallocating your portfolio to a bond portfolio, let's look at reallocating your portfolio, if we need to something that's more conservative. We're talking on the show about using the 3 buckets, the safety bucket, the income bucket, and the growth bucket. The safety bucket, that's your emergency fund. That's the money that's in the bank. Furnace goes out, you can write that check. That's great. The income bucket, we're looking at, okay, I need $5,000 a month. My Social Security is $3,000. I need to put some money in this bucket that's going to give me $2,000 a month in income. And it's not going to be it's not relying on the stock market to give me that income. So we've got that money there. If we have that built, then we can invest that growth bucket with confidence. So we can maybe be a little bit more aggressive. This bucket is going to cover inflation in the future. If the market does come down, we're not drawing on that bucket. So, we're not compounding the problem when the market's down 20% and you're taking out 5%, 4 or 5%. It's a lot harder to recover that. So, if you have it set up that way, then you don't necessarily have to just go to bonds. A lot of DIY people, that's what they're doing, is just going more conservative, which if you're doing it by yourself, odds are that means you're going to bonds, and it may not be what you thought it was.
You briefly talked a little bit about hail and roofs earlier, and now we're talking about buckets. And now I'm thinking about buckets when there's a leak in the roof, right. And now you're putting buckets around there. Your buckets aren't just for mopping the kitchen floor. They're for in this case, they're actually for retirement as well. What? Safety, income, and growth, the 3 buckets that you mentioned. If you feel like maybe your retirement might have sprung a little bit of a leak, give Jeff Gove and the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call. It's a wake up for anybody listening. You hear these old school rules and you think that maybe, my current strategy is actually based on some outdated myths. Maybe I got a great plan, but I haven't updated it in 10, 15, 20 years. Now is the time to get a second opinion on your own strategy and find if you do have those leaks, and maybe you need a bucket. Jeff can help you figure out where those leaks are in your current plan. Get that second opinion. Call Stonebridge Wealth Systems at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. Of course, you can always go online, schedule a complimentary visit at stonebridgeiwm.com.
Hi, I'm Tim Kulhanek with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. The stock market isn't the only risk in retirement. One of the biggest and often overlooked is the tax bill tied to your 401k and IRA accounts. As tax laws change, so can the value of your income. A Roth conversion could help reduce that risk and give you more control, but timing and strategy matter. Want to see if a conversion fits your plan? Take the Roth conversion quiz today. It's free, it's quick, and may help you make smarter decisions. Scan the QR code or go to stonebridgerothquiz.com to take the quiz now.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass Radio Show. I'm Mike Bauer, consumer advocate, sitting down with Jeff Gove of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. And Jeff, we've spent 30 or 40 years focused on accumulation, right? Making money, saving. Maybe we're checking all the boxes. We think that we're doing a great job and watching those numbers in our accounts, hopefully, grow. But, that's often the easy part for some people. I mean, you've shared this before, and the real challenge for many can be the distribution phase. Mm-hmm. When you actually are taking that nest egg, taking that hard-earned money from all those years and turning it into a paycheck that lasts. So, Jeff, why is that transition for many a difficult one?
It is a difficult one because the fact of the matter is when you retire, you've been in saving mode for all of those years, whether you work 30, 40 years. You've been saving. So you're putting money in this thinking, I don't want to touch that. It's for a later day. I don't want to touch that. It's for a later day. Well, now the day's here. And we still kind of have that in the back of the mind of, what if I take too much? What if, the market goes down and I run out of money and I have to go back to work because your employer is not going to pay you anymore. Maybe you have a pension, which would be great if you do. You have Social Security, so you have some fixed income, but odds are we're going to need some of this money. So if you think about, climbing a mountain and, you've climbed that mountain when you get to retirement, now we're coming over the peak. And, when you get over the peak of that mountain, there's a lot of different pitfalls, whether it's taxes, the government coming after your money, because a lot of us were told and are still being told that, hey, Mike, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. I can tell you a lot of times that's not the case. When you look at how Social Security is taxed, if it's taxed, paying more in Medicare Part B premium, there's a lot of different things that can be impacted by the distributions from these tax deferred accounts. So, that's one of the pitfalls. We have healthcare expense. Medicare is not free. You're going to pay, maybe it's $400 or $500 a month in premium for your Medicare. The deductible is really low, but also Medicare doesn't cover everything. So you have dental, you have vision that are now out of pocket unless you buy insurance. If you need to go to a home, if you need assistance, that's very expensive. So, all of these different areas are coming after that nest egg that you've saved. So we have to, instead of going down the other side of the mountain without any ropes, my father-in-law, back in I would guess it was probably in the 80s, he climbed the Royal Gorge in Colorado with no ropes. And he will tell you that was a really bad idea. He said he got, it was over halfway up and he was in a position where it was like, I've got to kind of jump to get the next handhold, and it's either going to grab or it isn't. And isn't going to be a good solution. It's not going to be a good outcome for him. Obviously, fortunately, he made it, but he would tell you, I would never do that again, ever. Same thing with your retirement. Let's not go over the edge without any ropes. We have, putting together a plan, it's providing ropes. Having that income bucket, it's giving yourself a rope that, if the market does fall, you're not falling with the market because it's not sending you back to work. You have that rope that's going to sustain you. You're not taking money out of the market when it's going down. You have another rope of a plan for long-term care that we're deferring some of the risk. We don't have to send all of the risk to the insurance company, but we're not going to take all of the risk. So that's another rope that we can apply to your retirement, where if you do need help, it's not going to take everything that you work so hard for, that you want to go to the next generation. These things are available to you, but you just have to take the next step.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be hiking without safety gear, whether it's ropes or it's, bringing the appropriate amount of water, making sure you don't, even if you're not climbing a mountain per se, you're just hiking, you want to make sure to have a plan before you go into it. Give Jeff Gove a call if you either have a plan and you need that, you need a complimentary second opinion, or if you haven't started planning yet, no better time than the present. Give the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call, 866-295-5146. Again, that's 866-295-5146. So Jeff, when people finally come in and sit down with you at or near retirement, right, in that kind of off ramp, if you will, what's the biggest gap you see between what we're talking about, the what you have saved, that the easy part, and what they actually have a plan for?
Yeah, really, it's the knowledge gap. It's the fear. A lot of people, our biggest fear, or consumers' biggest fear, people that are listening to the show, there's been surveys done. The biggest fear is running out of money. Did I save enough? When people come in, a lot of times, for the people that haven't called, I have several people that, we've listened to your show for 10 years and I'm finally making that call. And it's all driven by fear, because I don't want to find out what I don't want to find out. I don't want to be told that I haven't saved well enough. But I can tell you most of the time, a lot of the time, when we sit down and we put together a plan, maybe right out of the gate, if they stay on the path that they're on, that you're on a path that's not going to work, that you're going to run out of money. Whether it's, we're going to draw Social Security at 62, we're going to take money out of our 401k to pay off our house. There's a lot of different major decisions that you could make that could be catastrophic to your plan. But a lot of times where people are at when they come in, where it's, again, anxiety, it's, fear. And again, you stay on the same path, it's not going to work, but some small tweaks, little easy things that we can help you fix, get you on the right path and take you from, I've seen, a 30% probability of success, meaning we get to age 95 without running out of money. It's a coin flip. You're getting there a third of the time, to a 95% probability success, meaning odds are if you do this, you're going to make it and live the retirement that you want to without running out of money. So I would say, again, it's that knowledge gap of, I don't know if I'm going to be okay. A lot of times you can put together a plan that allows you to, know that you're going to be all right.
So Jeff, if somebody listening right now is like 5 to 10 years from retirement, right? They're on that off ramp, if you will. They're doing a good job of preparing at least themselves, maybe DIY a little bit and just mentally thinking about that this is coming up soon. What's the one thing you would recommend them do today that most people maybe aren't doing in that 5-10 years before retirement?
Yeah, I think, to give that type of advice, we need to sit down with you because it's different for everyone, right? Maybe I've never run into anyone that said, I wish I wouldn't have saved so much. So if you're questioning, should I save more? The answer is probably yes, because you're going to increase that probability of success. When you look at your plan long term. But yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. The taxes are a big piece. We talk about taxes a lot on the show. Are you putting the dollars in the right tax bucket? Because there's the taxable bucket, there's tax-free bucket, which we love, and then there's the tax-deferred bucket. So if you're putting money in that tax-deferred bucket, I would ask you to think about, what are you deferring into? Are we going to be in a higher tax bracket down the road? Look at the national debt. I would argue that there's a chance that we could be in a higher tax bracket down the road. If you've already done that, if you've already put a bunch of money, a big pile of money in that tax-deferred bucket, that's okay. There are things that you can do today to fix that, but we do need time. So if you're 10 years out and that's you, that would be something. We need to look at what tax bracket are you in today? Are there things that we can do today to alleviate some of the tax burden down the road? And we have a tax calculator that you can talk about where people can go and see that tax burden. What are the taxes that you're facing? Because there's a mandatory tax and then there's an optional tax. There's a minimum tax that you're going to pay if you've deferred. There's also an optional tax.
And if you want to learn more about your tax situation, if you want to see what your Uncle Sam bill is going to look like in retirement, because a lot of times people think, hey, retirement's when things get a lot easier. That's not necessarily the case. This is exactly what Jeff's saying. Go to stonebridgetaxbill.com, stonebridgetaxbill.com. Use the tax tool calculator. Just put in a couple things and it's going to be able to give you some information right there off the bat. And you can begin that conversation with even more knowledge in terms of using that tax tool calculator at stonebridgetaxbill.com. And of course, you can always call the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. Tax is a huge wild card in retirement income. And, in terms of planning for that, do you find, Jeff, that pretty much everybody, the people you talk to in the offices there at Stonebridge, but also more importantly, the clients, the people listening right now, that everybody feels like taxes are going to go up, and that's why now is a good time to plan with, I guess, sorry to go this far, but better to dance with the devil than the devil you don't, right?
Right, right. And that's, yeah, I think most people would agree that tax rates are going to go up. Again, you just look at the national debt. What's that website? Debt Clock. I think it's debtclock.com or something
the
like
U.S.
that.
debt clock. I was actually thinking, when you mentioned the debt, I was like, you know what I should do in a future show? I'll mark the number at the beginning of the show for the U.S. debt clock. And then at the end of the show, we'll take a look at it, and then we'll all just, probably cry into our Kleenex boxes.
Yeah. When we do tax workshops, and, I always tell people, if you've looked at this, you know the problem. If you haven't looked at it, don't, because it's terrifying. Just watching it just ratchet up. It shows you like debt per citizen, debt per taxpayer. It's a crazy amount of money. But I pulled it up on my phone, and I don't want to look at the website I just pulled up. I'm sad down
now.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think everybody agrees. And when you look at if you were to pull up like the history of tax rates, we're in a pretty low tax environment right now. So one conversation that we have to have is, because some people think, well, if I do a Roth conversion, that means I have to pay the tax, which that's true. But keep in mind, we're not deciding whether we pay tax or don't. Because if that was the decision, that's an easy decision, right? If you have $100,000, do you want to pay tax on it or not? Well, no. That's not the question, though. It's when do you want to pay taxes and at what rate? So if it makes sense, if you're in the 12% tax bracket, I would argue you're probably not going to see a lower tax bracket than that in the future. Yeah. Especially when you calculate in your Social Security how that's taxed. You get to, if you were born in 1960 or later, you get to age 75, not 65, age 75, and the government says you've deferred long enough, it's time to start taking money out of these accounts. So then, if you wait till then, which there's still things you could do if you're older than 75, but then the government's putting you in the bracket that they want you in, right? I mean, they're saying, okay, you've deferred long enough, you have to start taking this money out. So be proactive, because again, this isn't an optional tax. It's you pay tax now or you pay tax later. So just have a plan and pay as little tax as possible.
That's right. And you can go online specifically to stonebridgetaxbill.com if taxes are your primary question in terms of planning out your retirement. Use that tax tool calculator. It's easy for anybody at stonebridgetaxbill.com. You can give Jeff and the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call, 866-295-5146, as we're talking about, maybe saving was actually the easy part of retirement. All those years that you put money away in your 401ks and your IRAs, and, if you have a pension, great for you. But now that spending mindset requires a specialized plan to dance around the things that Jeff talked about, from Medicare to taxes and all of that. Give Jeff and the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call, 866-295-5146.
Hi, I'm Tim Kohanic with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. You've worked hard and saved for retirement, but how much of it will you actually get to keep? If your savings are in a traditional IRA or 401k, Uncle Sam has a claim on every withdrawal you make. And with tax rates expected to rise in the future, the cost of waiting could be significant. A Roth conversion may help lower your future tax burden. Want to know what your liability could look like? Scan the QR code or visit StonebridgeRothQuiz.com to take our Roth conversion quiz today and see if a conversion makes sense for you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Retirement Compass radio show. I'm Mike Bauer, joined by Jeff Gove from Stonebridge Wealth Systems. And Jeff, let's take a look back. Sometimes a little bit back, sometimes way back here in this segment. I want to take a look at some of the saints and sages, right? Some of the philosophers, if you will. We're going to find some wisdom, some little nuggets of wisdom that maybe have actually somehow stood the test of time. You guys focus on a common sense approach to wealth management. And this guy had a lot of common sense, except for maybe that time that he walked out into a rainstorm with a key on a kite. But Benjamin Franklin, he said, "Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship." But how does that apply to the friction and hidden costs many people have in their retirement plans today in terms of maybe, something that Ben Franklin put out there?
Yeah. So, I'll talk
ago.
about the obvious first. If you look at your credit card statement and you see, all of these different apps and the different streaming services, Hulu, YouTube TV, all of these different things. Like it's like, oh, it's $10. It's $9.99 a month. Not a big deal. I can afford that.
I still share some of them. I still use a few friends, my folks. I use their passwords, and they're starting to cut down on that. Like maybe I shouldn't say this on the radio here, but they don't like that. They're starting to cut that down. So now, I mean, even I thought I was getting away from $7, $8, $9.99 a month by sharing some, stealing borrowing somebody else's password.
Yeah,
and they're cutting down on that.
Yeah,
killing my bottom line, Jeff.
I mean, I went through a credit card statement with a client, and we found it was like $1,200 a month in just these nickel and dime things that, this person didn't even know what they were. Some of them, she had done it, but she didn't understand what they were because it was something that she did a year ago. Or these apps that charge you once a year. It's only $49.99 a year. So you forget to cancel it because it doesn't come out every month. So you don't see it every month. There's a lot of truth in that where you can get nickel and dimed to the point where, it is like you need to have another part-time job just to cover the expense. So beware of that. It is true that those can add up in a hurry.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm actually thinking, so my grandmother, I think it was about 4 years that she was paying, and she didn't know, she didn't really handle her expenses. She just paid the bills that came every month. And I think it was 4 years she was paying for an internet line that she didn't have, or a phone. I mean, that's what it was. It was a phone line. It was, it was a landline, and she hadn't had that for years. But it was a line item on the internet company, but it's a phone company, so it came on the same bill, and she just paid the bill every month. This is what and she never looked on page 2 or on the back of the first page. She just paid what was due, or had it set. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that you encounter that, okay, I've got it set up for auto pay. Auto pay is the easiest thing, but it can be a blessing and a curse, right? Because, if your bill goes up, or you're paying for something that you don't need or use anymore, then that is, like Ben Franklin said, a small leak sinking a great ship.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think about Planet Fitness, for example. It's cheap. I mean, you're paying like $12 a month or $14 a month. But, I think their business model is, let's make it cheap enough that it's not worth the pain of trying to cancel it. So you're just going to keep paying that every month. Because, I'm in Kearney. We have a Planet Fitness here, which it's a great gym. It's nice equipment. It's great stuff. But if you don't go and utilize that equipment, it doesn't matter how nice it is, right? I mean, it's doing absolutely nothing for you. I don't know how many subscribers they have to that gym. I would guess it's thousands. And when you go in there, there's not thousands of people in there, right? So I'm guessing that they're doing very well. The other thing that I want to touch on, though, because these are the obvious things, the things that all of us could find, right? You look at your credit card statement, you can see it. I want to talk about your portfolio. So if you have an investment portfolio, and let's say you own mutual funds, and you have a financial advisor that you're paying 1.5%, that you might see on your statement, right? You see you paid your advisor $500 or whatever it is. That's disclosed. And all of these fees are disclosed, but some of them are just in different ways. So you have a mutual fund that you're paying 1.25% on top of that. So that is just essentially netted out of your return. So you're not seeing that fee on your statement, but that fee is still there. You're still paying it. So it's coming out of your growth. And then let's say it's a non-qualified account. It's not an IRA. So these mutual funds, they have to send the income to the investors, essentially, which means you get to pay tax on that. So there's another expense that's all of these pile up over time. So if you schedule an appointment, Tim talks on our show a lot about, scanning your grocery cart. So if you go to the grocery store and you've got your cart full of stuff and they just start scanning it, and you get to see what the price of everything is. Because, when you go buy milk, and maybe you do look at the prices now, but a lot of people, if you need milk, you just go buy milk. You're not shopping the milk. Like, should I go here or here or here? You just go get it. You go to Walmart or whatever grocery store you go to, and you just get your groceries and then you see what it costs at the end. Well, we can do the same thing for you here, where we can scan your cart. So you see, okay, for this mutual fund, this is what you're paying. For this mutual fund, this is what you're paying. For this ETF, this is what you're paying. And we can just see if you're overpaying on fees, because fees matter. If you're talking about overpaying in fees by, 1 or 2% a year, think of the amount of money that you're paying out that you shouldn't be over a 10-year period. I mean, that could be thousands and thousands of dollars that, you could spend on taking your grandkids on a trip, or taking yourself on a trip, or buying the car that you wanted, stuff that you would enjoy using it for, rather than getting eaten up by fees.
We're talking some timeless wisdom, and right now we're talking about trying to avoid fees, because Ben Franklin said a small leak will sink a great ship. If you want to give a call to the Stonebridge Wealth Systems team and see if you do have some of those leaks, we don't want your ship to sink. So give Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. All right, let's go to a little bit more recent, not Ben Franklin. Let's get a little bit more recent, and let's go into our backyard here. Let's talk about the Oracle of Omaha. I'm going to pull out my 900-page binder here, let's say, of Warren Buffett quotes, because there's tons of Warren Buffett quotes. So here's one for you, Jeff. He said, among millions of other things, quote, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." Why is that idea so important?
That's really good. We talk about automating, everything. We talked about your bills, automating those. It's easier. It's the same for your saving. If you have a 401k at work, having that come directly out of your paycheck, it's automated. You get a match. If you're putting money in a Roth IRA, having that automated, so you're determining how much you're saving first, and then you're spending what is left. And maybe you're not spending everything that's left. Maybe we're, saving for an event or a future purchase. But yeah, I mean, saving before you spend is really important. We want people to save at least 15%. So if you're younger and you're just starting out, it's all about money in the market. So if you schedule that saving, you're going to get that money in there. I talk to my kids. I've got twins that just graduated, and we've talked about saving in a Roth IRA. The earlier you do that, you're going to be so much better off down in the future. I mean, it's millions of dollars different if you wait until you're 30 to start saving. Yeah.
Plant the seed and let the harvest grow is the hope there. Congratulations on the graduation, Jeff.
Yeah, it was good.
That's awesome. I mean, it's at high school, college, and nowadays you have like graduation celebrations for kindergarten and stuff like that too.
Middle school, all of it.
And those are all like little things that are costs maybe you don't expect, right? You don't plan that all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to need to go down to Walmart and stock up and do a backyard barbecue for a bunch of kindergartners or 8th graders or high school kids.
Yep.
Got to get it going. All right, before we wrap things up this segment, let's go way back, all right? We dabbled a little bit with Ben Franklin. We talked with Warren Buffett. Let's go back to ancient Rome. Seneca said, the ancient Roman philosopher said, quote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That's some philosophy right there.
Yeah, it's also really good. These are good quotes. We talk to people about that all the time. A lot of people want to know, like, how much do I have to have? I've heard I have to have $1 million to retire. And that maybe not. Right. Everybody's situation is different. If you need $100,000 a year from that $1 million, you're not going to make it. You're taking out 10% a year. Regardless of what other people, big people on the radio tell you, you cannot have a 10% distribution rate and be successful.
You can for 10 years, but then that's it.
Right. Yeah. I hope
you're done.
I mean, this sounds terrible, but I hope you don't live too long, right?
Yeah.
Who wants to go into retirement with that mindset? It's all about what you need from what you've saved. So you can't out save a massive budget. If your budget is crazy, like, there's probably no amount of money If you're spending everything that's coming in and you get used to that lifestyle, it doesn't matter how much you've saved, it's going to be really, really difficult. If you have saved well, your spending is pretty well locked in by the time you retire. There are people that are pretty conservative. I've got people that live on $2,000 a month. I don't know how they do it and own a home, but they do. And they've saved well. They might have $2-3 million saved and they need $2,000 a month to live on. They're not going to go start spending $10,000 a month. They're not going to do it because they're so locked into that spending. The other side is true as well. If you're spending $12,000 a month, I hope you've saved well because your Social Security is not going to cover that. But that's not going to probably change. Even if you get your house paid off, that you're not paying as much to the bank, or you're not paying anything to the bank, but you're probably going to spend that money somewhere else. So the spending is probably going to stay the same. So consider that when you're going into retirement, that our spending habits, are pretty well locked in by the time we get to retirement age.
During this segment, we heard some timeless wisdom from philosophers, Ben Franklin, the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett. But timeless wisdom is only valuable if it's applied to your specific situation, right? I mean, all this wisdom that's been, put in scrolls and books and papyrus for years is only valuable for you if it's applied to you. And you want to meet with Jeff. Share some of Jeff's wisdom here. Start building your own retirement roadmap. Call the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. Or schedule a complimentary visit right now at stonebridgeiwm.com.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Gove with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Are you taking too much risk with your retirement or not enough? Most people really aren't sure. That's why we created the Stonebridge Risk Quiz. In just a few minutes, it helps you discover your personal risk tolerance. Your score could reveal why your investments sometimes feel too aggressive or maybe too conservative. It's quick, simple, and eye-opening. Scan the QR code or visit stonebridgeriskquiz.com to see if your money matches your mindset.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass Radio Show. I'm Mike Bauer, consumer advocate. Now, a lot of times on this program, we're talking a lot about the what's and the hows of retirement, taxes, income, Social Security, Medicare. Today, I want to talk about the who with Jeff Gove of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Jeff, a lot of firms, they look the same on paper. A lot of firms, unfortunately, give everybody who walks through the door the same treatment. But you guys really have a very specific heartbeat at Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and you talk about common sense wealth management. For somebody listening in a car right now, for somebody who's tuning in for the first time, what does that mean to you when I say common sense in terms of managing wealth and helping people plan retirement?
Yeah, when it comes to common sense, we want to look at all of the different areas of planning, because for me, common sense means if we're putting together a plan, we better plan for all of it, right? What we found, when we started Stonebridge, Tim Scott and I worked together at another firm, and it was more just investment driven. So, we worked a lot with real estate investments, a lot of different things like that. But we felt like we were not necessarily doing our clients a disservice, but we were leaving a lot of meat on the bone as far as planning goes, because we didn't talk about Social Security. We didn't talk about how these investments actually help them in their overall plan. So when we went on our own, that's when we developed the Retirement Compass. So when we're talking about common sense, again, making sure we're covering all of your bases. So, we talk about your income plan. That's where everything starts. Having a plan that is going to allow you to retire the way that you want to, give you the income that you need in retirement. Then our investment plan, that needs to be invested in a way that's complementing your income plan. That's why we're investing, is so you can retire, provide income. Then we have your tax plan. We want to make sure that the investments that we made aren't creating a tax problem for you, that they're actually helping you from a tax perspective. Healthcare plan. If we have those other three plans in place, and then you go to a nursing home and it blows up the whole thing, we didn't do a good job for you. So we have to have a plan for that. Then the last thing is legacy planning. How do we get everything that you worked so hard for to the people that you care about in the most efficient way possible? So all of these different plans work hand in hand. We looked at, for somebody retiring back in 2012, and the same for today, what are the things that they need going into retirement? We offer home and auto insurance. So everybody needs home and auto insurance. We have somebody that handles Medicare. If you're turned 65, odds are you're going to go on Medicare. So we need to have somebody that can help you with all of those different things. And then the retirement compass to make sure we're putting you in a position that's going to allow you to be successful.
You talked about the retirement compass and those 5 pillars: investment, income, tax, healthcare, and legacy. I'm sure people listening right now are thinking, hey, you know what? I've thought about those things, or maybe I've started planning, but those might be all in different directions. You might have 5 different things, 5 different websites you have to log into, 5 different people you have to call, and you can put that all together in one cohesive, consistent plan with the folks at Stonebridge. You guys have offices in Grand Island. You're there in Kearney, Omaha, and Lincoln as well. I know you serve families all over the country, but if somebody's listening right now and they're tired of that big box corporate feel, or tired of having stacks of statements from different, different pieces of mail they get, how do they start the conversation with you guys at Stonebridge?
Yeah, you can go to our website, fill out a contact form, and we can reach out to you. We can do, today's technology. We can do Zoom meetings, so it's not a big deal wherever you're at. Got clients across the country. But I wanted to say too, when people come in, what we've noticed is you have an investment plan, and maybe it's not even a plan. You have investments, and you have a guy that is investing your money. When you go in for a review, they say you made this much money, or you're down this much. Here's your risk tolerance. Here's how we should build the portfolio. But if that's what you're experiencing, you're missing out. There's so much more to it, to having a plan, than what you have now.
You're not going to go on a hike in the middle of nowhere without a compass. You're not going to set sail on the 7 seas, I guess, without a compass. That's why it's important to have a retirement compass. That's why they've developed that at Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Give them a call, 866-295-5146. Whether you're in Lincoln, Omaha, Kearney, Grand Island, you can go into the office, as Jeff said. We can Zoom if you're located somewhere else in the state, 866-295-5146. And you can learn more about the process online and schedule a complimentary visit at stonebridgeiwm.com.
Did you ever think your retirement would be shared with our government? It's true. Your traditional 401k, IRA, pension, or similar retirement accounts are like a partnership with the IRS. Simply put, they want their tax dollars, and you have them. With our latest tax calculator, you can plug in your own numbers while sitting at home. To find out what your future tax liability could be, scan the QR code or go to stonebridgetaxbill.com.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass radio show. I'm Mike Bauer, consumer advocate. I'm here with Jeff Gove of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. And Jeff, you guys have offices in Grand Island, Kearney, Omaha, and Lincoln. I'm sure you see lots of folks looking for one thing, and that's certainty. That's peace of mind. Now, that said, we're seeing record-breaking interest in annuities today. There's all these studies out there about annuity sales are through the roof. And I want to start things off and specifically ask you about what are the different types of annuities? Because there's annuities, that's the big umbrella term, but there's some very specific directions people can go if they're playing in that sandbox.
Yeah, and you do have to be very careful with what type of annuity you're getting yourself into. So I'll just start at the top, and the first annuity that we'll talk about is a variable annuity. So variable annuity is an investment that it's in the stock market. So you're buying, call them sub-accounts or separate accounts of a specific mutual fund. So when the market goes up, you will go up. When the market goes down, you will go down. It is a stock market investment. Now, the benefit of a variable annuity is, which it could be a pro or a con, is it's tax deferred. So if you had money that you just saved in your checking account, for example, and you wanted to invest $100,000, you could put it in there, and as that grows, that is tax deferred until you take it out. The downside of that is when your kids would inherit that, they don't get a step up in cost basis, so they would pay income tax on all of the growth. Where if you just bought those mutual funds directly, they wouldn't have to pay income tax on that. They would get a step up in basis. They could sell them and not pay any income tax on that.
Okay, so variable tax deferred.
Yeah. The other downside or thing you need to be careful of is they can be very, very expensive. So I've seen over 4% per year in fees. It's really hard for you to make money if you're paying over 4% in fees. And the reason is they have what's called a mortality and expense charge, which is going to vary by contract, but might be around 1%. That's just to call it an annuity. You'll have admin charges, which might be another 0.15%. You have your rider charges. So if there's an income rider on the contract or a death benefit rider, you might pay another 1% for that. So keep in mind, we're paying 3 fees so far, and we haven't even invested our money yet. So now we have to go buy the mutual funds inside the contract. And if you call the carrier, which is what we typically do, if somebody has a variable annuity, we'll call the insurance company to find out what the expenses are. They'll tell you the average expense on all of the mutual funds is around 1%. So you add all of these fees up, and it gets really, really expensive. So you have to be careful with that. If you have a contract where you were told you're getting a guaranteed 7% or a guaranteed 8%, odds are it's not what you think it is. There's something, we call it funny money. It's a separate bucket of money that is just used to determine how much income it would produce for you, for example. So if you have that, or if you've heard that, I would encourage you to give us a call and we can dig through that for you to make sure you understand what you really have. So that's number one. Number two would be a fixed annuity. So a fixed annuity works kind of like a CD does, where it's paying you a fixed interest rate over a period of time.
It sounds a lot simpler than the one we just talked about. At least
it's very
me
simple.
On the surface. Fixed
you know what you're going to
variable,
get.
Just the words.
Yeah. So you might be able to get like a 5.25% or 5.5% interest rate for 3 years. So that's per year for 3 years. It is tax deferred. So you put $100,000 in, it's going to go up every year. It doesn't matter what the market does. End of the 3-year period, you could keep it in there or you could take it out. Typically, there's not going to be a fee there. There is a surrender schedule. You can get a lot of times like 10% of your money out without a penalty, maybe 5% depending on the contract. But that's an option. But keep in mind, it is tax deferred. So if in 3 years you say, I don't want to do it again, I just want to take my money, you're going to pay tax on that, on the interest. The principal obviously is tax free. You've already paid tax on that. Then there's an index annuity, which kind of combines a little bit of both. So it's your growth is dependent on an index. So let's say the S&P 500 we'll use as an example. Right now, I think you can get a cap of around 12%. And what that means is if the market goes up, market meaning S&P 500, you make up to 12%. So if the S&P goes up 8, you make 8. If it goes up 28, you make 12. So that's your cap. You can't make more than that. The trade-off is if the market goes down, you won't lose anything due to the market going down. So
okay, I like that because initially I was thinking, I'm like, okay, 28, I'm missing out on, let's quick math here, 16% of growth there, but that's a trade-off that, for a lot of people, I'm sure is worth it is, hey, if it goes down 20%, we have a COVID or a Y2K or a subprime, 2008. If that happens, then my floor is 0.
Right. Yeah. And it locks in every year. So it kind of stair steps up. So let's say that scenario played out and you made 12%. So put in 100, now you've got 112. And then let's say that did happen and the market's down 30%. You stay at 112. It's not just your 100,000 that was protected. It's now the gains every year on your anniversary that those would step up and get protected as well. So that's an index annuity. Sometimes you can add riders to those. If you do, there might be a fee. Typically, it's going to be less than 1%, but it varies by contract. So make sure you understand what you're buying before you get into it. But if you're being presented an annuity that's less than 10 or 12% cap, or if it's on some, index you've never heard of, and they're telling you you're going to get 300% of what this index does, because insurance companies like to come up with their own indexes. And
interesting. I did not know that.
So
it seems a little. It seems a little weird, a little funny.
Mike, if I told you you're going to get 200% of what this index does, I mean, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
That sounds great. Is that the Gove index or the Bauer index? What index is that?
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, you can't find it anywhere. You just got to basically take their word for it. But what are the odds that that index is going up? I mean, it's close to zero, right? I mean, for them to give you 200% of what that index does, they're expecting it not to do very well. So avoid things like that. I like the S&P 500 because you can turn on the TV and see, watch the news. The S&P went up 1% today. So I like that. There's also S&P 500 with a participation rate. So you might be able to get 40% of what the S&P does. So it's literally that. If it does 20, you get 8. You get 40% of what the S&P does. Lots of different options there. Those are the main types of annuities. There's also income annuities that have to be annuitized. Those are kind of the ones that have given annuities bad name because, maybe mom and dad had this annuity that was annuitized, which is kind of similar to a pension. And when they pass away, you go to get the money out, and the insurance company's like, there's nothing left. So, they started income for life. It was annuitized. When they die, it's done. The insurance company keeps the money that's left over. To get an income annuity, you don't have to do that type of annuity today. There's other things that you can do to get guaranteed income, but also have a lump sum death benefit of whatever's left over.
All right, so there's variable, there's fixed index, there's fixed, there's income annuities. If all of that makes sense to you, great. If some of that maybe doesn't make sense to you, that's the reason why you talk to somebody like Jeff, because he understands all of that in terms of the different directions that you may be interested in. If there's a direction that benefits you the best, they're going to drive you in that direction as well. They're going to help you find that direction with the Retirement Compass. Give Jeff and the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call, 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. You can always go online, stonebridgeiwm.com, and schedule a complimentary visit right there at stonebridgeiwm.com. So, annuities, there's record numbers in annuities. Why do you why is now the time? Is it interest rates? I mean, why do you think that guaranteed income products and things like this, word we're talking about with annuities, are gaining so much traction right now?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, I think a lot of people, when we talk about the pros of an index annuity, it sounds pretty good. When you can't lose any money and you can make up to 12%, that sounds pretty good. But the thing that you need to understand, the thing that you need to understand with any annuity is it's also going to come with a time commitment. So we don't recommend putting all of your money into an annuity. Really for anyone, because you may need some money. You may need to get some of it out. A lot of them, kind of have a backdoor where you can go in and get money out of them. Like I said, whether it's 5% or 10% of the account value. But even then, if you put all of your money into an annuity and you need all of your money for something, you're going to pay a massive penalty in order to do that. So you have to be careful there. But yeah, so I mean, it's an attractive deal. It wasn't long ago when the cap on these annuities was like 3% or 4%. Well, that's not as fun of a conversation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can make up to 3%. You can't lose anything, but are you going to keep up with inflation even? Probably not. especially in that time period, we were seeing 10% inflation. So, you're losing money every year. But now with 12% caps, with higher interest rates, even on fixed annuities, if we can get between 5 and 6% fixed, for a lot of people, that's really attractive. But again, I would say just be very careful. You don't want to put all of your money in one of these because you can't, if you need it, you can't get it all out. A lot of us get those invitations, and you may have too, have the picture of the delicious looking steak on the front. And they're inviting you to a free steak dinner, right? Well, a lot of times these are the products that they want to talk about. That they're going to try to steer you to. So you have to be careful with that. Is just make sure there's a lot of really good annuities out there, but just like anything, there's a lot of really bad annuities out there as well. And if you put your money in, you're locking yourself in for a period of time. There's some that are as low as 5 years on index annuities. We would go as long as 10 years. There's some that are out there that are like 16 years long. I don't like 16 years because that's a long time. That's a long ways down the road.
That annuity can get a driver's license.
Right. Yeah. So I wouldn't do anything over 10 years if it was me.
Well, and this is exactly the reason why the folks at Stonebridge Wealth Systems and the team there, the family at Stonebridge, is ready to help you out. Because, Jeff, I'm sure you have people that come in and say, Jeff, I want an annuity. And people who say, Jeff, I absolutely don't want an annuity. Do not build this into my plan. I want to stay away, hell or high water, no touchy. But that's why it's great to have a conversation with somebody like Jeff Gove and the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems, because they build the plan around you and around your situation and your life. When you walk in and you are, maybe you have something in your mind. Okay, great. They consider that. You say, hey, it's not just here's my statements. It's about here's my plan. And they build that not just for you, but together with you. Stonebridge Wealth Systems. You can always go online at stonebridgeiwm.com. They've got great financial tools. There's a retirement tax tool calculator, a retirement readiness quiz as well. But you can also schedule a complimentary visit. You can do that visit in person. 4 offices conveniently located in Grand Island, Kearney, Omaha, and Lincoln. You can also work with them remotely. You can always give them a call. 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. For Jeff Gove and everyone at Stonebridge, I'm Mike Bauer. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the Retirement Compass Radio Show.